You think you're too smart for religion. Cute. And if you think that, you might actually not be as smart as you think you are. Newton is one of the most brilliant minds in history. He invented calculus, he figured out gravity. Dude basically wrote the manual for the universe, and most nights he wasn't refining that manual. He was alone in his study, decoding the Bible like it owed him money. Not a phase, not a side quest. Years. He spent more hours on theology than on physics. The man who cracked gravity was more obsessed with God than with, gravity. So if genius was supposed to cure people of God, why did the actual genius get more religious? Newton didn't think math replaced God. He thought math was God's paperwork. A universe running on tight, elegant, predictable laws wasn't proof nobody designed it. To him, that precision was the fingerprint. Some of his beliefs were so far outside the mainstream for his time that he kept them hidden, tucked away with his other secret hobby, alchemy. Because apparently even Newton knew some interests need a locked drawer. Back then, people didn't know. Today we know because we are like the Karens in a small neighborhood anyway. That's not a man who didn't care. That's a man protecting something he thought mattered too much to risk. Fast forward 300 years, and scientists decided to actually test this. Was Newton a one-off weirdo, or does this pattern hold up? In the 1990s, researchers set out to measure something simple. Does raw analytical intelligence predict less religious belief? They expected a clean result. Smarter people, less God, straight downward line, science wins, everyone goes home. It didn't work out that way. The line existed, it was just weak, barely there. Practically apologizing for showing up. Doctors trained to trust nothing without evidence. Physicists trained to distrust their own instincts. Professional skeptics who question things for a living. Huge numbers of them were still praying, still showing up, still saying God felt real. At first, researchers wrote it off as noise, leftover childhood conditioning that hadn't fully worn off yet, so they tested it again. Different tools, different countries. One method is called the cognitive reflection test, which is really just a trick quiz designed to catch you giving the fast, easy answer instead of stopping to actually think it through. Same result, every single time. More analytical thinking predicted somewhat less religiosity, not zero, somewhat, and that detail is what broke the old theory completely. The old theory assumed logic should dissolve belief the way acid dissolves metal, slowly but completely. Instead, it turns out sharp. High-functioning brains can run two systems at once, one for solving equations, and a completely different one for grief, mortality, and the question of whether there's something behind all of this. They're not confused. They're switching modes, the same way you switch from spreadsheet brain to comfort your friend empathy brain without even noticing you did it. Now that second mode might be the reason some of these people are still alive. Researchers tracked 75,000 women over 20 years. The ones who showed up to religious services weekly had a significantly lower death rate than the ones who never went, not because of belief itself, because of what a Sunday morning actually builds. Same seats, same faces. Someone noticing if you don't walk through that door, in plain terms. That's a built-in social safety net that runs on autopilot, whether you consciously need it that week or not. Researchers adjusted for smoking, drinking, diet, and existing health conditions. The gap stayed exactly where it was. Then they checked depression rates, lower. Despair after losing someone close, lower. And here's the part that ruins the "I'm spiritual, not religious" defense. It wasn't private prayer creating this effect. It was attendance. Physically showing up week after week in a room with other people. A private thought can comfort you for 5 minutes. A weekly commitment reorganizes your entire life. Because now somebody clocks your absence. Somebody remembers your name, and your grief gets carried by more than just you. Strip out income. Strip out education completely. The survival gap doesn't move, which is strange, because education was supposed to be the thing that finally closed it. Right now, in America, people with graduate degrees attend religious services at roughly the same rate as people who never finished high school. That number shouldn't exist if the old theory was correct. The old theory was simple. More schooling, less God, like a straightforward trade. Instead, you'll find packed pews 2 blocks from major universities on an ordinary Sunday morning. What actually shifts with education isn't whether people believe, it's how literally they believe it. Fewer people treat scripture as word-for-word historical record. More people are perfectly comfortable rejecting a literal 6-day creation Monday through Friday, then singing hymns that same weekend, no internal contradiction required. Education didn't erase religion. It just updated the version people were running. So belief is getting softer, but the building's still full, which means something else entirely is doing the actual holding. For most people, belief isn't why they keep showing up. Showing up is why they keep believing. The gathering comes first. The meal someone brings after your father dies comes first. Someone remembering your name at the door for 30 straight years comes first. Walk away from the belief, and you may also be walking away from the exact people who show up when your life quietly falls apart. Humans are genuinely bad at reasoning in total isolation. We calibrate off the room before we've even tested the claim ourselves. A weekly gathering doesn't just repeat an idea. It turns that idea into a physical schedule, chairs and rows, a meal on the counter, a phone phone call after your surgery you never had to request. Sociologists have a term for this. It's called buy one, get one free identity, or more scientifically, embeddedness, which just means your beliefs get physically tangled into your relationships, your habits, and your sense of who you are. Once that happens, changing your mind stops being a quiet personal update. It becomes expensive. Because now you're not just revising an opinion, you're risking the people who showed up during the worst week of your life. Which brings us to the real problem sitting underneath all of this. Secular life solved food, shelter, and safety for millions of people. It never solved the question that's been sitting in the dark since we discovered fire. Why does any of this actually matter? You can answer every message, finish every task, eat, scroll, sleep, and run the entire machine flawlessly and still feel completely hollow operating it. Psychologists break meaning down into three simple pieces. Coherence, meaning life makes sense. Purpose, meaning your actions are actually aimed somewhere. Significance, meaning your existence carries real weight. Remove even one of those, and people don't feel liberated. They feel unmoored, like a boat that's quietly slipped its line and started drifting before anyone noticed. Modern life hands you endless stimulation and almost zero direction. More content, more choices, more private freedom, and none of it tells you what your suffering is for, or why death deserves anything other than raw fear. You can be materially wealthy and existentially poor at the same time. Not short on comfort, short on story. Viktor Frankl watched this play out inside concentration camps and later in ordinary civilian life. When people couldn't locate a why, the how became unbearable. So if belief really is functioning as a survival tool for meaning, why does it keep resurfacing in the one place that was supposedly designed to have eliminated it entirely? In Denmark, fewer than 1 in 10 people attends religious services regularly. On paper, that's the secular finish line. Low attendance, low doctrine, God barely mentioned in public life. But researchers stopped asking the surface-level question, do you go to church? And started asking sharper ones. Do you pray during a crisis? Do you want your child baptized? Do you reach for something larger than yourself when everything falls apart? The old pattern returned almost immediately. A man can skip church for 2 decades and still baptize his son without hesitation. A woman can call herself completely non-religious, only spiritual, and still request a hymn at her own funeral. Formal disbelief and deep religious inheritance are living in the exact same body at the exact same time. State religion shaped the calendar, the rites of passage, even the specific language people reach for when they're grieving, grateful, or guilty. So when someone highly intelligent drifts from literal belief, they're not stepping into a vacuum, they're stepping out of a structure that's still leaving fingerprints on nearly everything they do. The visible religion faded first. The deep pattern didn't fade at all. It just stopped announcing itself, which leads to the last, slightly uncomfortable question. What's actually shaping you before you're even old enough to argue about any of it? Anthropologists have traced recognizable religious ritual back at least 10,000 years before the first written law. Ritual came before doctrine. Rhythm and repetition came before reasons ever did. A young child can clap in time with a group long before he's capable of defending a single belief in words. Neuroscientists call this entrainment, which is really just a precise way of saying that nervous systems sync up and start moving together before minds have agreed on anything at all. You call that belief your body's been calling it survival the entire time.